Canadian people did not vote for fringe voices like the Bloc Québécois.
Something's a brewing here. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today, Danielle Smith blasts not only the Bloc, the NDP, and the Green Party all at once. She has had enough. She ain't playing. She's tired of Mark Carney's nonsense and his lies. This is brewing. This is going to explode here soon because we know full well that Mark Carney is going to unroll his net zero agenda. He's already starting it. He met with the UN guy already. He's not going to be building new pipelines. He's not repealing Bill C-69, the No Pipelines law. This is a powder keg waiting to blow. Let's jump into this. First up, we've got a breakdown here. It shows Nanos, shows who elected the Liberals, the group least impacted by the federal debt and interest payments. It's the same group that has their houses paid off, that's in retirement, that's not really worrying about cost of living. Now, something to note here though, boomers for Pierre are coming out. We do recognize all the boomers for Pierre, so the number is switching. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of Liberals in this over 55 group. All the people dealing with unaffordability are all down here. And we got Chris Stacey and Right Blend here on the scene again, catching Mark Carney leaving the office.
Hold there, please.
Mr. Carney, what comes next in the trade war with the U.S.?
Hold there, guys.
Will you be negotiating with Donald Trump, Mr. Carney? Our elbows down now, sir.
Okay, that's right here, sir. Thank you.
No problem. Mark Carney getting in, newly elected Prime Minister.
He's not going to answer anything. You might as well ask him about his dance moves. Next up, we got Danielle Smith with another press conference here. This one, Sheila Gunn-Reid asks her about Chinese canola tariffs and Bloc's opposition to pipelines.
Sheila Gunn-Reid with Rebel News. Canola is a $44 billion industry. It supports 206,000 jobs, 40,000 Western farmers. Yet Prime Minister Carney, during his campaign and even now, has said nothing about the 100% retaliatory Chinese tariffs on canola, thanks to the Liberals' green protectionist EV policies. So what is your government doing to ensure the canola tariffs are treated with the same urgency by the Fed as the auto and steel sector one?
Well, I can tell you that all of the Western premiers who have a large canola industry in their provinces, and that is regardless of political stripe, have raised it directly with the Prime Minister. It seems like it's a bit of a phony war. We've got a 100% tax on EV vehicles from China that no one's buying in order to protect an EV industry in Ontario that doesn't exist. And in return, we are seeing punishment on pork and canola in our Western provinces, which are products people do want. So I think the Chinese have been very targeted and direct in how they're trying to split our country up. And I think we need to revisit that. We obviously are going to have to find new markets for our products, but let's at least engage in proportionate responses rather than having a knee-jerk reaction that is only going to hurt our industries further. And that has been conveyed by myself as well as other premiers directly to the Prime Minister.
Mark Carney doesn't care because he's business partners with Xi Jinping. So that's why he's not even mentioned it once. Not once. And he's asked about his ties to China and the JCCC. He fumbled and bumbled over that answer. So I don't know why they would mention me. And the JCC one with the Globe and Mail, he said, oh, you shouldn't trust everything in the Globe and Mail. Got all pissy about it, even though it's proven that he's been hanging out with those guys. He's had meetings with those guys. So it's quite clear Mark Carney's compromised. Canadians voted in a compromised prime minister. That's why there's been no mention of China and their tariffs whatsoever.
The Bloc leader, who will hold some power and influence over Carney's minority cabinet, has just said that there is no future for oil and gas in Quebec or anywhere for that matter. Carney has also said he would allow a Quebec veto over pipelines. So how does Alberta then respond if no pipelines east is the deal that helps Carney keep his government from falling?
Well, I would hope that's not the case. The Canadian people did not vote for fringe voices like the Bloc Québécois or fringe voices like the Green Party or fringe voices like the NDP to control the agenda for the next while here. What Albertans and Canadians voted for was for Canada to become an economic superpower.
This is amazing. She just blasted all three of them in one go.
And that means also an energy superpower. And that is what I would fully expect Mark Carney to do. I hope that he's able to continue forward with an agenda that perhaps even the Conservative opposition would support him in. That's what I think the message of the election is. And I would surely hope that he's not listening to fringe voices from a party that is solely committed to breaking this country up.
I don't know if she used that language on purpose, calling them fringe voices, just to stick it to them, because that's obviously what they called the Freedom Convoy, unacceptable fringe. But that is funny. That is good stuff, Danielle.
Thank you. We'll go on.
Thank you. Net zero pipelines. China is our enemy and Alberta should diversify our trading partners. There's been these threats coming out saying if Alberta separates, they're not getting their oil to market. They can still send it down to America. Let's bring the Chinese cars so we can pay less and enjoy. Getting Carney to get on board with Canada becoming an energy superpower will be a very hard sell if you've read his book. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Canadians voted for us to have economic poverty in this country. That's what they voted for. Bunch of buffoons. They're going to reap what they sow. Moving ahead on this panel, they talk about Alberta separation.
In the case of Premier Smith, there's legislation, for example, that's being introduced this week that essentially lowers the bar for when a referendum can be held. She was asked during a press conference today on multiple occasions, is this about separatism? She indicated that polling shows there isn't wide support, but she wouldn't want to prescribe what it be used for. So I think the interpretation is she's not saying no way, no how. Premier Moe in Saskatchewan also said today, I'm a Canadian. I was reading, I believe the Canadian Press reported, but that he would not stand in the way of a vote to separate. I'm in no way discounting feelings of alienation, but does Nathan have a point in that, taking it to that step and not ruling it out as the leaders of those provinces is also irresponsible in the way they are accusing the previous government of being irresponsible on national unity?
No, I don't think so. I think, first of all, this alienation is a real feeling that Albertans feel. They're tired of being disrespected in Canada. It's not necessarily just about moving oil to the coast or getting natural gas to the coast. It's about respect. Alberta makes a major contribution to Confederation. And what do they get for that? They get ignored by the Liberal government for the last 10 years. They get Jonathan Wilkinson, Stephen Guilbeault running down the industry, finding ways to keep oil and gas in the ground as much as they possibly can. And then all of a sudden there's sort of bemusement at the idea that people would feel alienated and that they would not be satisfied with Alberta's place in Confederation. I think Premier Smith is doing the right thing. She's essentially providing a bit of a relief valve for people to either...
It's this bonehead down here shaking his head no. You watch the entire interview. This guy has bad take after bad take.
Demonstrate that they have support for this, or to go back to what they're doing and find another way to show their dismay. But this is not going to... This is a good way, in my mind, for people to say that we're upset about Alberta's place in Confederation, but it's not going to go, frankly, I don't think it'll go anywhere.
You just don't hear it from BC. We have lots of Western alienation as well, and we don't clamor every opportunity from our political leaders. I don't think there's a sentiment for Alberta to leave either. I'm just speaking to the very point that, Mani, you were talking about earlier, about creating the investment climate. And I think it's pretty obvious, bringing back notions of lowering the bar, making it easier for people to have a referendum that could lead to eventual separation, and the Premier not really saying this is not our interest, but instead actually threatening it with lists of demands. I just hope that there's a higher calling amongst all of us. Yes, there's frustrations, no kidding.
The Liberals brought in Bill C-69, No Pipelines Act. How are we supposed to have prosperity when we can't have pipelines? Every developed nation on earth has oil and gas. That's where it comes from. So these delusional buffoons think Mark Carney's net zero agenda is going to make everyone prosperous? No, it'll make Mark Carney and Brookfield Asset Management prosperous.
It's a big country. There's a lot of different interests. If you go east to west, north to south, that's fine. But we just had a vote. Let's give the government a shot. Let's see if they can work together with other parties, work together with the provinces. We have a real threat that actually talks about us being Americans. So
what, China? Oh, no, we're not talking about China because Mark Carney is compromised by China. Sorry, I forgot.
The border, let's focus, yeah?
Instead of it's up to Mark Carney. About referendum. He can address this right now.
I 30 seconds left. It's all yours, Christy.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, as a British Columbian, I think it's going to be hard for Alberta to hit tidewater if they do actually separate. I mean, let's state the obvious here. But I do think there was some form of a referendum that just happened. It's called a general election. And Albertans made their voice heard very, clearly. They voted almost exclusively for the Conservative Party. Okay, we understand. So I think the issue for Canada now is for Mark Carney to figure out, with some significant numbers of New Democrats in his caucus, how he's going to make sure we rebuild our reputation with overseas, with investors, and how we actually find our way to building more pipelines, more infrastructure, so that Alberta's contribution to the country won't just be recognized, but it will be maximized And it will do things like save our healthcare system and our education system and all those social programs that are so important to everybody.
Christy Clark, also a bonehead. So smug, you won't get your pipelines to Tidewater. Alberta doesn't need to get oil to Tidewater, it just needs to get it to America. If Alberta separates, it'll probably join America because that's a smart thing to do. Mark Carney already said he's not going to get rid of Bill C-69, so our country is screwed for the next 4 years. Eventually, Canadians will figure it out. Maybe not. Maybe our country's doomed to be a stupid country, run by greedy people and a clueless population. We're slowly gaining numbers though, so hopefully in 4 years we'll have enough people to actually turn this around. But at that point, how far back are we going to be? We're going to be 14 years behind from where we could have been prosperous. The lost Liberal decade. Now it's going to be the lost Liberal 14 years. Next up on CTV Power Play, talking about Pierre Poilievre's options here. What's he going to do? I should note too, they're going to be meeting on Tuesday, have a caucus meeting, the Conservatives, and decide who's going to be leading in the interim, what's going to happen.
Monty, I was just getting some details on caucus, and the first part of it will involve basically a vote on whether or not to use the Reform Act. If they vote in favor of it, that means that they then are able to trigger sort of like an internal leadership review. My sense is that there isn't a whole lot of interest among MPs to do that. I'm wondering what your sense is.
Well, I've, canvassed a number of people, and I don't get a sense that people are anxious to remove Pierre. They probably feel he made some mistakes. He probably owes the caucus a bit of an explanation, but he also did some things that were very good. He's built the party up. He's really, reached out to all kinds of new people and achieved some historic numbers. So he's really got a good case to make as well as to why to stay. But of course, ultimately, he's got to find a seat in order to really be effective as the leader of the opposition.
How do you think the fact that he doesn't have a seat, Christy, complicates the entire conversation about his future as leader of the party? Or does
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is he looks like a loser for not getting his own seat. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that everybody remembers.
A loser like you, like back in 2013 when you lost your seat in a huge upset to David Eby. Can't believe she just said that. She's had the same situation. She has the audacity to say that.
And it will highlight for people, he lost track of what the actual issues were in the election. And the issues were not Justin Trudeau, it was Donald Trump. He did, he lost his own seat. He ended up, I think, kind of with a terrible campaign message. He just couldn't get himself over the top. Even though, as Monty said, he got more votes and did better than most other previous Conservative government leaders before him. So I think it's going to be I think for the moment, the caucus is going to rally because that's what they need to do in the face of, this what I'm sure is a devastating loss for most Conservatives. On the other hand, though, I think it's only a couple of years probably until the Conservatives or the NDP decide that they want to force an election. And in that case, you will start to see the knives come out for Pierre Poilievre in a very, very big way. Jason Kenney, Premier Ford, lots of people out there who are very competent, very able, proven winners who would probably be interested in having that job. And I don't think anybody is going to say, you know what, you lost the last election, but you can win the next one, when there are lots of ambitious people out there who think that they can do a better job.
Christy Clark is a conniving, slippery snake. I think Doug Ford had a meeting with the Liberals, got them on board to try to help him get in and Poilievre get out, because they're all pushing this narrative.
What do you think his message to caucus, what would you anticipate from his message to caucus, Nathan, on Tuesday? Because there's this sort of interesting thing to reconcile, which is he did lose his seat. We haven't heard from him since that outcome. We heard from him, obviously, on election night. But at the same time, you didn't win the election, but you've got the biggest share of the popular vote that you've had literally since the 80s when Brian Mulroney was winning these massive Conservative governments. Like, how do you square those things for caucus or for Canadians?
Well, how does so much winning look like losing? Right? All of those things you said are true. What Monty said was absolutely correct, that the party improved, but it's against what do you measure success by. And at Christmas, success was government or bust, right? It's kind of like a team in the playoffs that almost makes it. And then the next run, this time I'm in Toronto right now, Vashi, so excuse me if I'm going to use any Leaf metaphors right now. But the idea is that the goal was government. That goal was not achieved. So, and the seat loss, like we all know now, on election night, we wondered, why is Pierre talking so early in the night? He suddenly is out on stage, he's doing his speech, and we're together. And they knew they were losing his seat and didn't want that result to be in front of everyone and then have to make that speech to the nation. What does he need to say to caucus? I don't know. I get the sense in talking to some Conservative MPs that The loyalty is still high. There aren't a lot of quote unquote star candidates that Mr. Poilievre recruited in the last election. That's actually a benefit right now. So you don't have all these bruised egos that were getting ready for their various cabinet positions and are now ticked off. The people Christy mentioned, they're waiting in the wings, but they're not out chirping. They're not out in public. Well, with a few exceptions, taking on Pierre right now. I don't think they're clamoring for his job. So I think he's probably fine with caucus. Give it a few months. And if the polling's off, if they're down significantly, that's when things start to get a little bit more rumbly as to the question of, is he the right guy for next? He was great at opposition. Then he applied and auditioned for the prime minister job and didn't really pivot into that feeling for a lot of Canadians that this guy could handle the top job. He was a good attack dog, but is he a good leader in terms of the country's desires for what's next? No.
What do you really want against Donald Trump? Do you want the attack dog, or do you want a boring banker who has no experience actually dealing with a guy like that? He says, oh, I've negotiated in boardrooms. Okay, sure, whatever. There's many factors here, but one of the big ones was all the slander on Facebook that didn't get addressed. There needs to be legal action. There needs to be some sort of challenge. So these groups that are connected to liberals spreading this stuff rampant in Facebook groups where there's a bunch of those 55 plus liberal voters, and it goes unchecked. Not just Poilievre. I've had multiple conservative members message me and show me slanderous stuff of them too in their local communities, and it goes unchecked. That was the strategy of Jenny Byrne. Don't fight back against it. Just let them run rampant with it. That's the wrong strategy. That stuff festers, it breeds, it grows, and then it becomes what people think are fact. It needs to be nipped in the butt. Because right now, there's a bunch of women who think that Pierre Poilievre was going to take away abortion rights and going to take away women's rights, which is all absolute nonsense.
I know, Monty, it's just been a few days. And obviously where you are in Alberta, the support for the Conservatives was very high. And again, a record high for them since the 80s. But to Nathan's point, it's very far from where things were projected, which was over 200 seats for the Conservatives just at the beginning of January. When you think about the results, why do you think they ultimately fell short?
Well, there are a few reasons. On the one hand, I think Pierre had a message that did resonate with a chunk of the population. There were clearly two different sort of sets of people or sets of concerns that drove the election outcome. One was affordability, housing, this kind of thing. The other was the narrative around the need to defend Canada against Donald Trump.
Saying it plain and simple, anyone under 55 who wants to be able to afford life voted for the Conservatives as a whole. Anyone over 55 has their house paid off, doesn't have to worry about finances, was given the luxury of fearing Donald Trump, scary Donald Trump, and thinking that a banker would come and save him because CBC told them that the banker would save them. It's a huge problem in our country that we have a propaganda arm of the government indoctrinating our own citizens, and our citizens just don't think for themselves. And with that, defunding the CBC as one of the main campaign attacks doesn't look good to those people, further pushing them away wanting to vote for Conservatives. And obviously, if you're watching this, you're not one of those people that's indoctrinated by that nonsense.
And in that instance, we didn't pivot fast enough. We didn't make a strong enough case that we could do that. And it fell in the minds of many Canadians to Mark Carney to be that person. So I think we need to bear that in mind going into a new government. I think there's going to be a period of time where the expectation is that parties work together as much as possible to strengthen Canada so that it can withstand the tariff threat and any threats of annexation from Donald Trump. That may mean doing some things that we don't normally see in Parliament, like trying to work together on pieces of legislation or on initiatives. And I think, Canada's expecting some happy warriors right now on all sides. So it may be a different thing that we haven't seen in a very long time in Canada. And I would encourage Pierre Poilievre and my Conservative colleagues to keep that in mind because I think it will be important at some point down the road when we're asked whether or not we contributed to the defense of Canada in the way that we should have.
Canada is going to split apart here. This is just going to get more and more divisive, not only between Liberal and Conservative, but the under 55 and the older 55. There's just going to be this anger between the groups. And ironically, it's the left that are the non-inclusive. When you look at what's happening on Twitter, all these leftists insulting Pierre Poilievre, so nasty. I thought they were the inclusivity group. These are some of the most nasty human beings on earth.
Christy, you've sat for a long time in the legislature. You know better than, and all three of you would know better than me. Do you think that this moment will lead to something like that, even though it may be against natural instincts in a political arena?
Well, I think it should. I mean, I've won some and I've lost some, both the same number, by the way, over the years. These are very difficult times for the leader. I have to say my heart goes out to him in some ways. But I do think, Poilievre has not shown the ability to really kind of soften up and take a different tack. This election may be an important learning moment for him, and I hope he...
One note on that, at the end of his campaign, he had a lot more moments where he was showing that softer side, whether it was on that Knowledge podcast, he's talking about his mother being his biggest cheerleader. People like those moments, the real human moments, the moment where he held Anna and kissed her at the very last Carleton rally there. People really liking that. Moments where he has his kids, he needs more of those moments to bring in more of the female voters.
Takes it, because you're right, Vashi, that is exactly what needs to happen, what Monty Solberg talked about. We need to find some space to try and come together over the most important issues. I'm not naive. I don't think they're not all going to still be fighting and jostling, but the really key things, we need to be united as a country. And a lot of eyes are going to be on Pierre Poilievre to see if he can do that. If he can, I mean, who knows? He might survive to fight another day. I think if he fails to do that, it'll be terrible for Canada. And I think it will probably be his death warrant as leader.
Well, Carney needs to do it too. I would just say that.
Yeah.
I mean, Carney needs to reach out to Conservatives, certainly in Western Canada. I know we're getting to that. She's sorry to get ahead of it.
Segment, I promise. Yeah.
Yeah, but it really is critical that he shows that good faith that we didn't see from the Trudeau government on resource development and that sort of thing, because it can't be a one-way street.
Nathan, sorry, you got to jump into.
My question, and Monty's not wrong. Mr. Carney is different than Mr. Trudeau. He's not, as he told us 4,500 times in the election, he's not a politician. The House itself, the way Parliament has been conducting itself over the last few years, particularly as it ramped up towards the election, was just unworkable. Who's to blame for it? Well, there's lots of blame to go around. Ironically, not so much towards the NDP, who were trying to get things done, but then suffered in the election for maybe that reason or other reasons. I just don't know if Pierre's got the gear, right? Does he have that phase or ability to be graceful in defeat and magnanimous and understand this larger question that you've raised and that your other guests have spoken to, that we're facing this crisis right now, bickering and sniping. It just got so awful, Vashi. You saw it. It was deeply personal, non-functional. This is not the time for that. Does Pierre have that ability to rise to what's being called upon all members of Parliament right now? We'll see. I guess I'm a little skeptical because I've known him a long time and he's really good at the attack. Let's see if he's good at this other thing, and that might stand him in good stead and might keep him in his job right now if he wants to go for the top job in an election from now.
Let me just follow up very quickly with just a 30-second question, and maybe, Monty, you can answer this. Do you think there's a possibility of caucus pressuring him for a move in that way? Because I interviewed a couple of MPs, for example, this week on my radio program, who actually brought that up proactively, the idea that on an issue-by-issue basis, for example, on energy, if that comes up, like, that they would need to project a different image to Canadians in this moment. Like, can MPs lead him there?
Well, first of all, nobody is ready for the job of prime minister. You have to grow into it. It demands things of you that you don't expect before you get that job. So to be successful, you have to grow and you have to find different gears.
In the case of Justin Trudeau, he didn't grow into it all. He was just an absolute schmuck the entire time.
When it comes to MPs, I think the MPs are equal partners in the success of the Conservative Party of Canada, and they have a right to demand from their leader that he or she grows in a particular way to ensure that they win elections and command the confidence of Canadians. So I think it's only right for MPs to call out their leaders, preferably behind closed doors, so they can have a fulsome discussion, not in front of the...
I mean, Corey Tanecki, Doug Ford's campaign manager, should have done. He should have privately said, hey, you guys need to pivot on Trump or whatever, not blasted out with a bunch of F-bombs on some podcast show.
The national media, like we often do. But, really that is something that tells me about whether or not a leader has the humility to really deserve to be the leader of the party.
When it comes down to it, Pierre's run for prime minister was good. He brought in more people than in the last 40 years, but there was a few blunders. Obviously, Donald Trump coming in really mixed up everything, but some of these more restrictive things like not having Pierre answer more than 4 questions at every press conference. Pierre's the attack dog. He can answer any of these questions. Just let him loose. I don't think Jenny Byrne should be restricting him. I think she should be letting him roam free. Bring in the CBC, let CBC on the jet, let them ask whatever questions they want. He can bat them all down. That's where he's at his best. I think it's time to take the governor off of Pierre Poilievre. He doesn't need it. He's a great politician. That's his strength. They should have played to that.